Welcome to Nonsense, Season 3, Episode 22, our big story and our second show of the week. I'm Jeff Parker.
I'm Stittle.
For more occasional listeners, we've split our show in half, releasing headlines on Tuesdays and big stories on Thursdays.
Yay!
This time, we're looking at sweet amnesia, the comfort and corruption of nostalgic recall.
My favorite thing is remembering things better than they actually happened.
I'm shocked by how many things in my life I can't remember at all.
Yeah, that too.
My life is less about nostalgia and more about absent-mindedness drifting into Alzheimer's.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's amazing how every single week I got to get you to sit down in front of the mic. Okay, Jeff, let's just talk here about the thing.
Put your pants on. I know this episode is partially inspired by old video games, and I'm going to say I was never into video games, and then my friend Nathan is going to remind me of all the hours that we wasted playing Doom and MS Golf and pinball. And I know I played the coin-op version of Asteroids so much I wore down part of the button as a kid, and Street Fighter and Super Mario and Mortal Kombat. But I swear, in my mind, I was never into video games.
That's a funny way to sort of reconcile all the time you spent, quote, wasted on video games, just remembering not playing them. See, nostalgia, it completely works.
I guess.
Interesting that you bring up video games. That was part of the inspiration for this episode. But I can actually one-up that. So Doom, remember when Doom was released, the successor to Wolfenstein?
I can't remember that at all. I only played it nonstop for like a week.
1,000 times?
Yeah, oh sure.
So it lined up right around the time that CD-ROM drives were pretty much ubiquitous with machines. I remember it was really cool that you could play Doom and put an audio CD in the drive.
Oh yeah, yeah.
And listen to music. Like this was a thing. I know I sound like a fucking dinosaur, but you could even skip tracks from the Doom command console.
Yep.
And for whatever reason, I had like a heavy metal sort of number of years in my life, and I had just bought Pantera's Farther Beyond Driven. And now to this day, whenever I hear tracks off that album, I can visualize running through the sort of the halls of Doom. Like those two things are inseparable.
Sure, of course, of course.
My neurons are completely burnt for life. When I hear Pantera, I think of Doom.
Absolutely. I can tell you about every bad swim meet I had in high school.
Okay.
I have trophies and ribbons from swim meets, but I have absolutely no memory of how I got those.
Sure.
I can remember every girl I ever dated and everywhere I failed as a human being in those moments. This is my version of nostalgia.
Well, that's, first of all, a darker version of nostalgia. We should probably unpack, maybe not on this show.
It's not good.
I find that odd because all I remember about high school was being the most liked and the most handsome and just the most charming kid. Everybody loved me.
Sure.
And I had to resign as a write-in for the homecoming queen like 3 years straight.
Didn't you drop out of high school?
Oh, yeah, actually, that sounds more about right.
Okay, when good memories go bad, the distorting power of nostalgia. Let's do it. Can I just cut to the end of this segment and say nostalgia is a huge problem right now?
Is it?
People longing for an idealized past that never was?
Yeah, I think that's really the biggest part of the problem.
Gosh, wasn't it fun? We were all more racist and sexist than we are now. Wouldn't it be great if we could all be that way again? Right? It sure was lovely when even the smart, hilarious gay people had to hide in the shadows for fear of losing everything. Those were good days.
Yeah, I miss not being able to go to restaurants and have everybody look just like me. That was way more fun.
Remember when white males won everything because nobody else was allowed to?
Well, that was last year.
Remember when you could say and do the most horrifically offensive things and everybody pretended it was all in good fun?
Yeah.
What is wrong with the world that we look back on those times with nostalgia? How much of a coward are you that you don't want to compete with gay brains and female brains and brains covered in different colored skin than yours?
Well, here's the thing. The ones that look back upon it nostalgically with awe and aspiration to return to were the ones that were on the good end of the stick.
Of course.
I don't think a lot of people on the bad end of the stick are like, oh, I really want to go back to that hiding out in the dark shadows of the street.
For sure.
It's weird. It's a perspective thing.
It is. Why are you afraid to give a boost to people who've been held down for centuries?
I didn't get a boost just being a fat, white, straight male and just everything just being handed to me. I got no boost.
Exactly.
Oh, wait.
There is no organism, let alone country, that gets stronger by reducing genetic diversity. What is wrong with you that you can't embrace the modern world with modern careers and do things that we actually need done in this century? You're not nostalgic for better times. You're nostalgic because you're a pussy.
Well, okay, that's a little sexist when you say it that way. I feel like you could maybe you could
You're right.
maybe you could just say like a coward or like a weak or maybe even wussy if you really wanted to.
You're nostalgic because you're a wimp. Is that better?
Yeah, wimp. Wimp's better. Wimp's better. I prefer not to use the genitalia of women to describe weakness. That sounds suboptimal to me.
Okay, here's what I'm thinking. We should discuss the allure and deception of nostalgia.
Yes.
Look at how it works and then discuss the consequences and implications of distorted nostalgic memories. And then finally end with, we'll look at how to navigate nostalgia with awareness. Is that okay?
Yeah, I just want to talk about old video games, but sure, we can do that too. That sounds better. Your way sounds better.
However you want to go.
I mean, I was just going to be like, hey, Frogger, remember those cars? Yeah, that sucked.
I liked Frogger.
I kind of feel like you had to like Frogger if you are of our age.
I was not really into video games, but yeah.
That's what I've heard. Meanwhile, our switchboard is lighting up for people calling in to say that that's a lie. So, sure thing, Jeff. Yeah, you weren't into video games.
You know what show I always look back on nostalgically?
Mork and Mindy.
Saturday Night Live.
Oh, for sure.
Your mind edits out these zillions of sketches that were terrible. You only remember the great ones.
100%.
It's amazing how that works.
Yeah, when you're in the moment watching it, you're like, wow, this is really shit. And then a couple months later, you're like, oh, remember that one skit they did that was great? Yeah, you totally.
I listened to 70s on 7 radio on Sirius, which is 70s music, just because it's, music I grew up with.
Yeah.
And it is a very select subset of music that was played in the 70s. Wow, it just sounds like hit after.
I know.
You listen back and you go, they just don't write music like this anymore. Yeah, because they've taken out all the bad songs.
They took 10 years of hits and compressed into a 45-minute loop. Of course it sounds amazing. That's an awesome example of, how your memory of time feels a little warped now when you're into it.
Yeah.
So the impetus for this, as I just mentioned, was reading a little bit about video games. There was an article in ours. I'll put the link in here. If you were an old video game fan, I mean like early PC games, you should read it. It talks about some of the Sierra titles and about how the recollection of these games was like, these were amazing.
So fun.
You were on,
so fun.
Yeah, you were on, King's Quest 3 and you had to go on this adventure and it was funny and it was well written and you had these great puzzles and you go back and look at it again now through your eyes today and you're like, oh, this is actually all kind of terrible.
Yeah.
Like the art's enjoyable, but everything else is just sort of terrible.
We were learning to do it. It had never been done before. The whole genre was being invented.
Yes, and you had, limited memory. You had to try to stretch this game out. It was basically 20, like guys do speed runs of King's Quest in like 20 minutes, which I think is fantastic.
Awesome, yeah.
And meanwhile, it took you months before. And do you remember they had a 900 number tip line you could call?
No.
Do you remember this?
I don't remember.
I mean, first of all, most people don't even know what a 900 number is or was. But basically, if you got stuck in the game, you could call this 900 number.
They charged you per minute, right?
There was a pay per minute. They would tell you, it'd be like, whatever, like 70 cents to call and 50 cents a minute. And you could talk to them and they would tell you what you needed to do. And it was your way of paying for these tips for the game. It was nuts.
Sure.
The article was talking about how his recollection, the author's recollection of these games was that they were lovely and it was this, great part of his childhood.
Yeah.
And he goes back and plays them and he's just like, this is terrible. This is a huge mistake. I should not have come back and done this.
I think most people, if they look back at any part of their lives or even the nostalgia they have for things that happened before they were born, those times were never as good as you want to remember them.
Of course.
You are subsetting 70s on 7.
Exactly. You're cherry picking the best parts.
Yeah.
And that's what nostalgia is. It's this sort of sentimental view of the past. Typically for some time or some place you have some happy personal association with. That's how I think of nostalgia. It's like this set of like Instagram filters that you can view your past through.
True.
Interesting to note. I did not know this. I'm curious to know if you knew this because you know more about the words than I do. So the root of nostalgia comes from this classic Greek word meaning homecoming and pain, which I find fascinating because I've never associated nostalgia with pain.
That is precisely what I associate nostalgia with.
So fascinating to me. And like they even in sort of pre-modern times, nostalgia was considered a medical condition, a debilitating medical condition that you'd have like anxieties from mercenaries that were fighting away from home. And it was this like debilitating disease, even described in some cases as fatal, which I don't understand how that's possible.
Right. By the way, that's not me. I had a lovely childhood. Yes. I grew up in a lovely part of the world. I had lovely friends.
Yep.
I had lovely parents.
Yep.
I have none of this stuff to complain about. And yet when I look back, for whatever reason, my parents or they'll say, you only remember the dark stuff.
Sure.
I remember my own shortcomings. That's my version of nostalgia. Ignore me.
No, that's not unique. There is some of us, what I would call or describe technically as the happier people. They look back.
Better adjusted people.
The more well-adjusted. The people that aren't Michael Douglas and falling down. Those people, they typically call this version of nostalgia rosy retrospection, I think is what it's called. And that's sort of the everything in the past I recall more positively than it actually was when I experienced it.
And I recall everything in the past more negatively than it actually was.
And they call that blue retrospective.
Oh, it's a
which
thing.
Is really interesting. Yes, it's a thing.
Oh, that's good to know.
Yeah, you're not alone.
Good.
You're just in a group of people that are just, sad.
Damaged.
No, there's blue retrospective and there's rosy retrospective. So this is like where the term like rose-colored or rose-tinted glasses comes from, right? It's the same sort of concept.
Yeah.
It's interesting to think about, well, why? Like, why does that happen? Why do you think about the past in one way or the other? I'd argue, rosy or blue.
Yeah.
Why don't you remember it as it was? Like, what's the reasoning for it? That part was kind of interesting to me. From what I've read, and I'm no expert on this, I've read a couple white papers in preparing for this, but it seems like we don't really know the answer. What we do think we know is that one of the explanations is that the brain is just had to like simplify the memory.
Oh, yeah.
Like it was just less details to remember. If you didn't have to remember all the other nuances around it, you could just sort of pick a version. Now you're using up less like neuron space when you write this thing into ROM. And I think that that's a very interesting like concept. Like it takes less neural connections to remember less detail.
Kind of seems also like if you had a rough upbringing, you want to forget the rough parts.
Sure,
It's
of
a little
course.
easier on you if you just sort of smooth the edges and make it nicer. And I think that might apply to me in the other way because I had a lovely upbringing. I might be kind of okay with reliving the rough parts and those rough parts being very real for me.
The way you worded it for most, I would argue is probably like a reasonable criteria of survival, right? You remember the good things, but then I don't know if, does that mean you're gonna make the same mistakes in the future going forward? Certainly folks have had some terribly traumatic childhoods and things that were not great happen to them. They do remember them, something gets stuck on it, right? They can't get over it.
Can't get past it.
Yeah, I don't really know what it is that makes one more likely or the other. It's interesting to note that there's been some studies on this, what they call nostalgia prone individuals. So these are people that were more likely to engage in nostalgia. They typically are more pro-social in behavior.
That's interesting.
I thought that was really interesting. I had never thought about that correlation. If you think of things in the past fondly, I guess you're then more likely to go be pro-social and more, which I guess kind of makes sense. Like if the average of your experiences has been net positive, you're going to go have more of those experiences. Yeah. It even talks about how the association was stronger for affective empathy versus cognitive empathy. So affective empathy is where the feelings and the sharing the emotions of another person, while cognitive empathy is understanding them. I never thought about that from a function of nostalgia. Yeah. But you go, okay, well still, why are we doing this? How does this happen? Because all your emotions, right? They seem to evoke nostalgia more so than not. Your nostalgia is more invoked by emotions, I guess what I'm trying to say. Okay. And those go through your amygdala first.
I was just about to ask you how this all works.
It's squishy. From what I can tell, it's pretty squishy, right? The brain is a fascinating thing. But because this stuff goes through your amygdala first, which is the emotional seat of your brain, typically anything that sort of evokes emotion, or even like cultural phenomena, music, movies, television shows, video games, things like that, are more likely to trigger nostalgia. It definitely works on me a little bit for films, but really more so music for sure. Like as I mentioned at the start of the show, there's like this one album that if any track off that album is played, I immediately go to this place in my mind of playing that game because I did it for hours at no end. And it's also kind of fascinating to me that how much that's been lost. There are single tracks, music tracks that I can associate with vehicles that I've owned over the years because I just happen to have a CD in the player. Yeah, there's one track in particular that I associate with the first Roadster that I bought. And if that song comes on, I immediately think about driving that car with the top down, my hair blazing around in the air. Like because it was just on CD and I played it a lot.
Your tiny, tiny short hair whipping around in the wind.
I thought you were seeing my tiny, tiny short shorts. And I was like, how did you know? You weren't there. But what's fascinating to me is like, I do wonder, this is a total tangent, but I do wonder how much of that have we eroded because you have things like Spotify where now you can just play all of the songs. I remember Pantera because there were only 10 tracks, 12 tracks in that album. Right. And they just played it in a loop over and over and over while I played that silly game.
Right. That doesn't happen anymore.
That doesn't really happen as much anymore. I guess you can have a playlist of 8, but who has a playlist of 8?
Right. Like, you have the same issue with TV. We all had TV shows in our day that we grew up with. We all know we have these common references.
Same episodes?
That's not the case now. There's the same actual series.
Or same shows. Yeah,
but
sure.
That's not the case now because there's so many. Yeah. There's no common cultural touchstones like that anymore. And I'm sure music is the same thing. You can listen to your music and not somebody else's music, and you can have it just precise playlist that you have. So now you don't have the common playlist.
I mean, it is fascinating how that's changed. What effects it's going to have on my kids' version of nostalgia for video games, I have no idea. But it's really, to me, it's interesting to think about.
Well, there are video games that will be in the common memory for kids of your kids' generation.
Sure.
Minecraft,
for sure.
Everybody will remember Minecraft.
I mean, I have to believe that their recollection of and remembrance of Minecraft will be similar to like ours of Legos. It's like this creative world, this thing that you can build. Maybe. Awesomely, my kids still play with and use Legos, certainly because I insist upon it. But it's really fascinating because what else is Daddy going to do? I keep buying all the sets.
Sure.
My wife's like, do the boys really want these? And I'm like, who fucking asked the boys? I don't care. I'm buying them for me. What do you mean?
What boys?
Also, yeah, exactly. Oh, yeah, I've got kids. My wife's favorite question asks, she's like, so wait, I don't get it. What do you do? I'm like, you put them together. And she's like, and then what? I'm like, then you put another one together. She's like, but what about the first one? I'm like, why are you asking questions?
Why you got to be so complicated?
I really don't understand this. Like, why you don't ruin this for me. But as you were mentioning, and this part I find fascinating for sure, but sort of like my gap in understanding is that you'll get this nostalgia triggered by negative feelings as well. Mine normally come from positive feelings. It's this own like mood and heightening emotion that you'll get from nostalgia where someone like they're triggered by something now, something in the present or potentially in the future that is scary. And that triggers this nostalgia. They go, oh yeah, but in the past I did blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
And I think that's the really interesting one to zoom in on as we talk about here, which is where folks are like, they just romanticize the past. You know, it was so much better before. It's like, wait, was it really now? Or are you just using that to sort of mentally combat this thing that's more difficult for you to understand and grasp in present day or the future? And that's somewhat fascinating to me. That seems to be certainly not unique, but more common than not is how people deal with these sticky wickets of now.
Which brings us to the consequences and implications of distorted nostalgic memories.
Absolutely. Look, all things are going to change your memory, right? And nostalgia is just one of them. But it's very interesting to think about how nostalgia will just, as you had said, like one of the consequences is these bad decisions.
Right.
Like you're going to make shitty decisions because you have this selective amnesia called nostalgia that you are like, oh, well, hey, trickle down economics worked great. Let's bring it back. And it's like, wait, hold on. That first part there, it didn't actually work. If your premise is that it worked, your premise is flawed. I don't think you can trust your conclusion.
Yeah.
And you also see this a lot. I put this under the sort of selective amnesia bucket, but more like generational. And I still do this on the daily, right? Someone says, oh, the problem with the millennials is blah, or the problem with Gen Z, they're just lazy. And I'm like, every single fucking generation has said they're smarter than the ones that came before them and they work harder than the ones that come after them. It's like, that is not how this works. Like you can't all be saying the same thing and have it be true.
Kids, I don't know what's wrong with these kids today.
Yeah, their music and I don't understand that. I'm like,
it's never not been the case.
It's never not been the case. I'm just like, why can't you just break the cycle? Like just go, no, maybe that's not the case.
Although the opposite of that is one of my favorite jokes from the Flintstones movie.
Yeah.
Barney is rubbing two sticks together trying to start a fire. And all of a sudden he says, ooh, I'm turning into my father.
That's really funny. That's super funny.
Brilliant.
Separate the fact that I feel like all dads have to go through their own fire starting. You become a dad that way. You certainly become a father when you're the one that's in charge of making flame. Like another great example is I was talking with, I think it was some other parents and possibly even my wife. I can't remember if she was talking to me at the time or not. But we were talking about cursive writing. And my basic point is there's no reason to have it anymore. The point of cursive writing, if I understand it correctly, was to be able to write quicker.
Yeah.
It's a whole separate set of characters you've got to learn. For the occasional speed improvement of writing more than like, where does cursive benefit you? I don't know, a couple sentences?
It's just different.
And okay, while we're here, what the fuck's up with the capital I and cursive? What happened there? Like what? None of that. He goes off to the left and then down. What were we thinking? And the Z? I don't even know what happened to the Z. It's like they were out of strokes and they got to the Z and they're like, fuck, I don't know, make it two humps. You're like, what? At a diphthong? Or what's the thing that comes down? I don't even know.
I don't know, Andy Rooney. I don't know what's wrong with cursive writing.
You've called me a lot of things, but never that. Look, I think there's a progression and there's things that you certainly don't need to learn. I think it's okay that you're not learning cursive.
Yes, sir.
Okay, so also getting stuck in this nostalgia, it can really just hold you back, stunting your growth.
Sure, if you think you need to be in buggy whip making because that's what your father did.
Exactly.
I have some very bad news for you.
Yes.
We've moved on.
Okay, that news is a little stale. You might want to get it out there a little sooner. But yes, of course. You don't want to be where the puck was. You want to be where the puck is going, Wayne.
Right.
Here's the other thing, too. This nostalgia, as we have seen, can be used against you. For sure.
Used against you.
Yeah, of course.
Okay, like how?
Well, even just something as simple as policies built upon these things you remember, right? These sort of ghost stories, if you will, and anything that they can use to sort of manipulate, they being the person who's making the narrative, right? If it's a politician or a business owner or whatever, who's got some narrative to work against you because they go, well, you believe in traditional values, don't you? We need to ban all these books because they challenge traditional values. You're like, well, wait a minute. How far back of traditionalness are we going here? To which part? The beheading part? Where are we going? Only in, as it turns out, the answer is typically rooted in, fat white men.
Sure.
That's where the concentration of the power and the rights should be. And as long as you have that, you're fine.
Well, that's a huge part of what the problem of nostalgia is you want to go back to a time when things were good for you, for your people, for people of your gender and with your skin color.
Yeah. Was it really that good, though? I'm not sure it was really that good. I hear what you're saying.
There was a time where white men had it much better.
Sure. But like you go back a little farther and you're like, well, unless you were King Henry VIII.
Oh, for sure.
You weren't much better off being like, you know what I mean? Like
the mass of the public, for sure. 1929 was a disaster. And yet people are remembering in 1930, the immediate post-depression time. We were still in the depression. People are remembering that like it was a great time, like it was something we should recapture.
Okay. So then the question becomes, though, what do you do? How do you navigate through this?
Yeah.
How are you cognizant of it? And I think that is probably the best part to get to, right? How do you recognize that you are seeing things through rose-colored glasses, right? How do you know that what you're doing is maybe not as clear as it could be? For me, it's pretty simple. Like just ask questions. If you hear someone saying, or even yourself saying the start of a sentence with, well, things were better then. And you go, okay, accept the premise. What was better? Like, walk me through it. Like, let's actually take apart the things that you're suggesting and not just well, things were better, therefore we should do all those things.
Yeah.
Wait, no. I can remember, and this is why I loved the Sierra Games article, where you go look at that and you're like, oh yeah, these were great at the time. And you're like, yeah, they actually weren't. And there's a bunch of other shit at the time, like mimeographs and dial-up BBSs that compared to today were fucking terrible.
Terrible. They were awful. Yeah.
Like, is anybody sitting around going, man, I really miss mimeograph machines?
Well, I miss the smell. Yeah.
Thinking about and again, this is sort of what inspired me to think this way from the Sierra article, your mindset of the time. The 12-year-old me playing computer video games or King's Quest 3, different mindset than the version of me now. Probably less grumpy, but different mindset.
But also for the world, a very different thing, because all of the video games that came after it that improved upon it didn't exist.
Yeah.
It was the cutting edge.
It's also super interesting to just... fact check is not the right term, but like inspect the things that are said.
No, fact check is the correct term.
Is it fact check?
Not to always take this back to music.
Sure.
Listen to 70s on 7 and you go, wow, they only wrote hits.
Yep.
Listen to an air check of an actual radio broadcast from the 1970s.
Yes.
That's a fact check.
Yeah.
It's a different world. It's like, oh, I don't know most of these songs.
Yeah, exactly. Because 1 out of 30 was a hit and the other ones were just the garbage that was in between the hits.
It's Saturday Night Live with the best of all cut together. It's tremendous.
Yeah, I mean, SNL is such a great example too. There's so much gold in there, but then you just have a bunch of,
but mostly
carbon.
not.
Yeah, exactly. Mostly not.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
You put the gold together and you remember the pieces that you saw that were absolutely terrific. And it's like, wow, that's the greatest show that ever was.
Every 50 years, you get a killer show.
Also, you look back at things that were at times when they were good for you.
Yeah.
There's a natural tendency.
Yeah, of course.
To look back at times when things were good for you. You look back at your memories and you're the protagonist of the story. And of course, in my memories, I'm not the protagonist. I'm the idiot who's causing all the problems. But most people, when they look back, and they are the protagonist of the stories. And this is when things were really good for them.
Yeah.
Completely ignoring how awful it was for everyone else.
Absolutely. I think that's one of the great benefits of nostalgia. Is you get to retell the story through your own eyes.
Your way, sure.
Yeah. And then you, because you're the protagonist, you're like, but then this terrible thing happened. But here's how I overcame it. That overcoming may have been 3 years later, right? It didn't.
Right.
It wasn't necessarily a thing that happened at the same time.
Or a complete invention.
Or yes, manufactured out of whole cloth. Yes, that is another option. But to that point, that nostalgia, it's great. You can use it to your benefit in a way that's not, without blinders on, I guess is what I'm trying to say. Mm-hmm. And you can use it for sort of storytelling. You can use it to sort of accent your creativity on any particular point. You'd be like, oh, hey, by the way, I did this before, right? Like whatever, my silly stories from 30 years ago about modems. Like you don't let go of it. You just don't rely on it as gospel, I guess is what I'm trying to say. Poorly.
Well, it did happen. I mean, you don't want to look back at things that were not great and look and say they didn't happen. At the time, modems were cutting edge. The part of it that's fun for someone of my age is to look back and say how far we've come.
Totally.
The progress we've made. You don't want to go back and have everybody be a coal miner or a farmer or whatever.
Yes.
Those times might feel nostalgic, but the truth of the matter is we've really advanced. You really should not want to go back to those times.
For the folks that listen to both shows every week now, when we do what we call our vintage ad, that's typically what we're trying to showcase with those. Like you have this week, we talked about a multimedia computer because at the time you had computers and then you had multimedia computers. Yeah. There was a whole different set of computers that could do things like graphics and sound.
Yeah.
Sound was not a given until like maybe the late 90s or early 2000s. That wasn't a given on a computer. We've come so far now where like now my kid's watch has better music synthesis than my first 10 computers.
Oh, absolutely.
That is bananas. And it was $39 at Target.
Our kids will never know those times. Take it back one more step. I know you probably don't remember this, or maybe you will. When computers had to come with a coprocessor so they could do floating point operations.
Of course I remember that. The 387? How dare you, sir?
That's exactly right.
The DX. The 387 DX. Yeah, so you couldn't, you could do floating point math. You just had to emulate it. It was very, very slow.
Yeah.
But yes, so what Jeff's alluding to here, I can't believe that we're going to really show our age on this. To make computers cheaper, Intel released a chip that didn't have a chunk of the chip that would do floating point math. They made it a coprocessor, a second processor that you could then add later, which is kind of bananas to think about, especially when sitting on my desk at home right now is a device that will do a couple trillion of those operations per second.
Sure.
And I basically traded like a loaf of bread for it. Like it's just nutso to think about how far that's come. But yes, the coprocessor. But even at the same, well after that, we released machines with ZIF slots. You remember what ZIF stood for? Zero insertion force. And the concept was you could swap out your chip. You could buy a 486, SX 33, and then later you could buy a DX 50. DX meaning it had the coprocessor built in, and drop it in. Later, it's like, well, yeah, but now shit's all soldered together. Like it moves as a unit, not as components. But then it was components. Yeah. That's all gone.
I don't have nostalgia for putting together pieces of computers, although I still enjoy putting together
home automation garbage.
It's just tiny little computers. Yeah, it's just moved. Exactly.
Yeah, it's totally moved. And I very much like that. I have no nostalgia for the past of like, oh man, I was so much better to put together my computer. No, that was fucking terrible. Like ordering different pieces. No, I have a machine that's a utility that works. I get to go build a bunch of other shit that otherwise doesn't exist. And that to me is way more fun than building the thing. At the time I loved it.
I think that's way more fun. Yeah.
Way more fun. Because now I'm building a thing that either didn't exist before or somebody else had a pattern for, but it's a one-off. It solves this specific need that I have or desire, not just general computing so I can access the rest of the world, which is what we were doing then.
And part of it for me is the cost difference amuses me greatly. The fact that for a couple of bucks, I can buy a processor that blows away anything that I was spending $5,000 on when I was,
it blows away everything that you've bought together in totality up to 5 years ago.
Right.
That is bananas to me.
Right.
Think about like the progression of Moore's law that way.
That's easy for us to look back at the times of technology and how things have changed. I think it's not as easy if you're not a technologist. I think you can look back with nostalgia at prior times and think, wouldn't it be great if we were all growing corn again? Or,
of course.
if we were all doing trade within our borders much more. I mean, that's so much better. It's not so much better. It's horrible.
What percentage of people, let's just say in America, do you think would say, yes, I would like to go back to a time where we all grew corn?
I don't know who's going to say that, but if you look at going back to the 1930s, an awful lot more people were required to work on the farm to feed us.
Oh, without a doubt.
Now, it's a very small percentage of us that have to work on the farm. Times have really changed.
Without a doubt.
The tax structure has changed a little bit more, too. There's a lot fewer people in the middle class now because of the way the tax structure works. But that's a tax issue.
It does beg this question of like the nostalgia of the jobs and the workforce. To me, I question, is that really what you want? Like what job do you want to go back to? Corn is obviously going back a little bit farther, but I go back to like, what is it that you want to do in the workplace? What is the gig that you want?
I'm saying corn to Dodge saying manufacturing.
And I do think AI is really fascinating to think about where that's headed and where it's going, because while it's going to make a lot of things more efficient and likely, let's say, quote, remove a bunch of jobs, especially these, quote, white collar jobs, what I don't see it doing, what I don't see AI doing anytime soon is plumbing. Like I don't see there being an AI robot anytime soon. But what I do see is there being AI to help people be plumbers.
Yes.
Right? You get rid of the admin, you get rid of the planning, like you get rid of the finding the customers. Like if you make that stuff easier, and AI will certainly help in that adventure, now you've got a reason for there to be more plumbers. And if you've got more efficiency, those plumbers can make a higher wage.
Sure.
There's a lot of things that we still have to do that I don't see us making robots to replace anytime soon. To me, and maybe I'm just overly utopian on this, the things that you can automate, fucking automate as fast as you can. Automate them, make them efficient. But I would argue that the biggest challenge in this, and I think this is where nostalgia really works against us, is the duration of those roles, right? Especially the heyday of those roles is quickly getting more and more compressed.
Sure.
Let's just bring this back home. Really talking and engaging with people that don't share your view of the past. past. Don't share your nostalgia, and try to have an honest conversation with yourself and with them. Challenge each other to be like, okay, what did you see here? Why? You saw X, I saw Y. Who's right? Right? 'Cause it's probably neither of you. Like talk through that and try to figure that out. Try to get a more clear view of that. But then also your drive on this to me this transcends just nostalgia, but just in general, just being curious about what else is there, what you missed and why. Not locked on to, well, nope. Yeah. I remember Sierra games being amazing. Like, okay, have you gone back and played them?
Yeah.
No. Well, okay, how do you still know they're great? I just know. Okay, you might be wrong. Let's just go try.
Sure.
Like the only thing that's gonna possibly change is your view. So I think staying curious and digging in a little deeper is one of the best things you can do to understand and sort of navigate around your nostalgia biases that you may or may not know about.
I think also have a passion for where we're going.
Yeah.
Have a passion for the future.
Yes.
Discount the past. It is over.
Good point.
We have to move
Good point.
forward. We're not moving back. So get excited about where we're going.
I don't know enough about tax policy to speak to it with any sort of certainty, but it does seem like there has been an erosion of the folks in the middle. I personally don't think it's because they've, quote, lost their jobs. That does not seem to be the reason. My understanding and view of what we all sort of agreed to was like, let's get rid of the stuff we don't want to do, the stuff that is rote and doesn't require a lot of forward thinking. We're going to put those into lower cost centers, and instead let's go develop more interesting things. My problem with this is it does seem to require folks to level up their skill set.
Always.
And I feel like that's where a big part of the gap has been.
That's been through the history of time, though. That's never not been the case.
Yeah.
I used to be a hunter-gatherer, and I spent all my time hunting and gathering food, and now there's all these people called farmers.
Sure.
And they're doing it like commercially in ways that they're raising the food. Well, yeah, times have always changed.
Man, wait till you find out about Joe. He's a trader. You can just go there and trade with him anything you want.
Times have always
he's got
changed.
Bagels.
You've always had to
he's got
update
waffles.
your skill set.
Yeah, this is the progression.
All right, that is all the time we have. We have to get out of here, but quickly before we do, have you seen or read anything good this last week?
Yes, absolutely. As everybody here knows, I'm a big fan of hockey.
Sure.
It's, in my opinion, I think it is the best team sport. They're super professional on and off the ice. They travel as a team. They always dress well. They're wearing suits. They almost always display a tremendous amount of sportsmanship.
And then they get into fist fights actually on the ice with each other.
But you know what's great is like these guys will beat the living shit out of one another and then go have a beer after the game. Like I've always appreciated that. Yeah. It's almost like a WWE sort of anger level. It's really not, but that's a whole separate episode. But there is a tradition, a hockey tradition that I have showcased to my kids now for several years.
Yes.
And it's the post-series handshake.
Yes.
For those who don't follow hockey, at the end of especially a playoff series or any sort of tournament, both teams will shake hands.
Yes.
And to me, it personifies this concept of winning with humility, losing with grace, and doing both of them with dignity.
I hate the fact that this does not happen in the NBA.
Yeah.
That they finish a series, they get knocked out, and they storm off to their locker room as fast as possible.
Yes, I also hate that. I think it is such a terrible way to showcase sports and sportsmanship.
Right.
And in hockey, these guys will fight. I mean, you will literally have lost teeth, cut faces, blood, and they will all get out there at the end of a series and shake hands. Like everyone goes in and shake hands, winners and losers. And I think it's that importance of character in both victory and defeat. I've always highlighted this to my kids. I think it's important to be modest in triumph and gracious in defeat.
Right.
And then just maintaining respect and honor, right, in all situations. Over the weekend, the Dallas-Winnipeg Series, this was game 6 of the Dallas-Winnipeg Series. There's a player who I don't really know anything about, Mark Scheifele. He's a center for the Winnipeg Jets. He decided to play on Saturday. So this was an elimination game for the Jets. His father died earlier that day.
Ooh.
And he still decided to go play.
Wow.
Right. And he said it's what his father would have wanted. I'm sure for him, it was better to just go out there and be able to focus and not have to think about life around him.
Puck in net. It's a lot simpler than no more dad.
Yeah, exactly. He actually scored, I think, the first goal. The announcers that called the goal did a really awesome job calling it and saying, like, you know, this one's for his dad. It was, you could see the look of joy on his face. Anyway, they went on to lose the game. The Jets lost the game in overtime 2-1.
Sure.
You know, as soon as the game was over, you could see the emotion hit him, Scheifele, and his whole team sort of crowded around him, you know, gave him some comfort, gave him some hugs. And then in the handshake line, every player from the other team, I don't mean most, I mean every player from the other team, from the Dallas Stars, they shook his hand and took a few extra seconds with him and gave him a hug, you know, expressed their condolences. And I was just so moved by that. It was such a show of sportsmanship by every Dallas Stars player and the effort shown by him to go out there and play in this game. Yeah. And even though it wasn't the outcome that he wanted, I was really moved by that. I thought it was awesome. And it was really, really incredible to watch that with my kids.
And it is worthy of pointing out and praising because it's such a great
It was
thing.
incredible. It was, and even if you're not a hockey fan, I put some of the clips and you should go watch the the lineup afterwards. I mean, these are guys that were fighting, team sports is basically our version of war these days, right? It's like you're watching my home team fight your home team and go to battle. And then after, see these guys all line up and go shake hands. And, one team's going out to play for the Stanley Cup. The other one's going home to play golf. Yeah. And this guy's got to deal with mourning the loss of his dad. And I thought it was really incredible. So that's what I saw from over the weekend.
And kids, if you're listening, when you lose a game, you go to your opponent, you shake their hand, you look them in the eye, and you say, good game.
Good game. Oh, go fuck yourself is out. Would you say good game? Is that good game?
That's it.
But you have to. It's important. You have to.
It is important.
That was the thing that I saw the best in the past week, and I was really moved by it. How about you?
Hannah Gadsby's Douglas, a hilarious comedy special. It's not new. It's from 2020, but I just saw it, so it's new to me. It's the second comedy special from my favorite Australian autistic comic for Netflix, and it digs deeply into the complexities of popularity, identity, male hormones, and her most unusual dog park encounter, which I won't explain because I don't want to give it away. Yeah. It's also a Penn and Teller piece in a way. She tells you about the show, including giving away the really big moments beat for beat before she performs it, and it totally works.
That's incredible.
Great fun. Hannah Gadsby's Douglas on Netflix now.
You're not the only person to plug this show to me, so I'm going to have to go watch it.
She's so talented.
That's awesome.
That is the episode.
Thank you for joining us for all this nonsense. Truly terrible podcasts from The Awful Company. Visit us on the web at nonsense.productions. I'm Stu.
I'm Jeff Parker.
If you like this program, please follow, download, subscribe, and like at Apple Podcasts, YouTube Music, Amazon Music, AntennaPod, iHeartRadio, Spotify, my favorite Overcast, or wherever you may get your podcasts from.
Nonsense is brought to you by Ginkgo biloba. We're not sure it does anything, but we like to pretend it enhances memory. It also looks like a word jumble you have yet to solve. Ginkgo biloba, it's just fun to say.
You realize I'm sitting here now for 20 minutes and try to make another fucking word out of Ginkgo biloba. You've ruined my day.
Sorry.
We'll be here every Tuesday and Thursday morning for more nonsense. Now with supplements that do work. Please join us. I mean, ginkgo biloba. Next time I'm at the massage parlor, I'm going to ask them for ginkgo biloba. Just see what they say.
I'd like the deep tissue ginkgo biloba, please.
Do you do the Swedish ginkgo biloba? Why is this so funny to me? What is it about ginkgo biloba that I find so amusing?